just wanted to check you can all hear me okay? Yes. Yeah? Okay, great. So thank you, Aquila. And thank you, everyone, for inviting me here to be here, Your Excellency, and everybody in the room that's really given their time to be making part of this. And also those who are parents, who are sharing the aspirations for their children, and to want us to not have conferences like this, because we've normalized it, as Aquila touched earlier. I was on a plane flying here from Air Baltic day before yesterday, and I just wanted to share that, that people we've been flying, the first airline was in 1919. I think it's KLM. But my pilot actually gave the announcement about when we're landing and when we're taking off was a female. Now, that's not a big deal, but it is, because I noticed it. I thought, yeah, wow, that's cool. There's something poignant about that. But it is also tragically sad, right, that we stop to notice it. How long are we going to keep noticing that? And that's our work, right? And it just got me thinking about that. Anyway, I just want to share that. So the title of my this presentation is Diversity is about counting people. Inclusion is about insisting people count. Now, knowing the difference is really important. It's fundamental. But perhaps you're going to wonder, well, what does he mean by that? Surely that's what we're talking about here, diversity. But I'm going to sort of, hopefully, ask some questions and get us all going a little bit. And maybe really ask where our solidarity really is and where our challenges need to be. But I'm going to sort of wait a little bit longer for that. So this slide is really me. You can see me there. I look like that guy. So my name's Atif Choudhury. I'm one of the founders of a well-known social enterprise that's working to support over 26,000 people in the UK. It's grown, really. We work internationally. We're working with the United Nations, as Aquila said. And it's a really exciting challenge that we're taking on, because our discussions isn't really about gender, but it's about inclusion. And what does that look like? It looks like lots of things. It's about social economics. It's about participation. It's about invisible barriers. It's about the stories we never get to hear. And it's about the realities that show us what we can do more. Now, DNA, diversity and ability, is won lots of awards. And I'd like to say, yeah, it's really nice to stand there and talk about awards and things. But that's not really that exciting. What is exciting is we're this good at what we do because of our differences, not despite them. As a company, as an organization, we're a social enterprise, and 85% of the team will self-identify as disabled or neurodiverse. I can touch on that later. But it's the very richness of that lived experience and the reality of when people feel psychologically safe to share their stories that get us to the places that are influencing the United Nations. I hope that becomes a normal thing. But right now, it's still unusual. So, my next slide is here. So I'm going to remind you of the title. Diversity is about counting people. Inclusion is about insisting people count. What I'm really asking here is, when we think about diversity, when we think about women, for example, we ask ourselves the questions, which women? What are their stories? What are the realities that said, it was hard to be here? Not just because she's a woman, but because perhaps she's a brown woman. Perhaps she's from poor Lithuanian. Perhaps she didn't go to university. What are the stories behind this experience that says, we need to insist that we ask more? Now, it is a challenge, because right now we're hearing some really good evidence and we're hearing some discussions of progress from the professor here, and we're also hearing some reality checks of what just simply isn't happening enough. But we need to get that right, really from the beginning, because if we don't, then the optics of who participates in the future of the Nordic states, the Baltic states, or even the whole world, the optics of who gets to participate will come from a certain angle, and it will be usually those who have accessed an education or been able to access inclusion. So here is a challenge, and I want to ask, share it. This is something I truly believe in. I think true inclusion itself, it moves at the speed of trust. Challenge me on that a little bit later if you can, but I'm really asking the question, what does it take for people to share their stories? It's not enough that we say that we are men or women or brown skin or marginalized? What does it take to say we are socially marginalized, but you know what? Here in this room, it doesn't have to be. In this room, it feels safe. And this is the story that makes this room even better. How do we make that easy for people? And it's really important to. How do we understand that diversity isn't just about anti-racism one year, disabled people the following year, climate change the year after that, gender when it's eventually happening? That these are experiences that are all interconnected. And that when we only talk about one experience, we're missing the wonder of the other experiences. And our responsibility is to say, I am curious, I am excited, I am choosing to anticipate what it takes to welcome you. In leadership, surely, if leadership is anything, it is about being excited about the stories we can learn from. And how do we anticipate? That's really hard to share those stories. It just really is. There's not a person in this room that isn't nervous standing on this platform. I am, correctly. And but we can anticipate that. And we can work out how do we share people's responses to that. So, these are things that I don't think anyone in this room is going to disagree with. Anti-racism. Anti-racism is not about not being racist. It's about looking at social structures and the structures we live in, the structures that we perpetuate, the structures that we've inherited, and asking, what are those structures doing today to change this? It is not saying, don't discriminate or don't be caught. Celebrating diversity, of course, but I'm asking inclusion. What does it look like? Calling out misogyny, absolutely. And I think that the last speaker eloquently said, this won't change until men want it to. Absolutely. I'm proud to say I'm a father of 2 children, a boy and a girl, who are their mother's here, and she's Lithuanian. I'm a Bengali man with 2 Lithuanian children. I did not see that coming. Yeah. If you'd have asked me 15 years ago, would I imagine that I would have a Lithuanian child? No, absolutely not. I have a 9-year-old son, and his responsibility is to care for 51% of the population in the human rights. It's his responsibility to own that as much as it is his sister's. And how do we get him to do that? Well, it's simple. It's to work out what happens if that responsibility is not met. And it's not a hard thing to ask a young boy, because young boys have become young men, and young men have power. And that's where we talk about what does that power do if it's not supported. We create equity. I'm going to move on a little bit, but I just want to ask or show this bit. And I think I'm touching on this a little bit already. Impact. When we get this right, we get lots of things right. But we understand that nobody here in this room, not a single person here in this room, is coming from one space where they're just a woman or they're just a man. Nobody here. We all have multiple stories. Stories we share, stories we hide, stories we wish we could share. And by not sharing them, we are perhaps dangerously not making our workplace easy for ourselves. And even more importantly, we may not be making it easy for the next people coming. So it's a tough piece to think about. But and this is really about leadership. And I'll say it again, our role as leaders is to anticipate that and to work out what does it look like. So we have culture, sexuality, age, class, gender. I work a lot in disability in the UK, and I guess that's what I'm quite well known for. But the disability pay gap will not change in my lifetime. In fact, there will be no one alive in this room in the UK to see that change in the UK. I'll all be long dead. So that is a tattoo of shame in lots of ways, as is the gender pay gap. But the UK only really pushed on it when the BBC got caught out for it. Yeah? It's not because a country with a very progressive Equalities Act knew about it. They knew about it, but they didn't care until it became a household issue. And we were discussing the BBC, and that's when we watched every FTSE 100 company rushing to show that they had it understood. They didn't. They really didn't. And I suspect that this employment gap will be the same. But I'm not really here to talk about disabilities. I'm here to talk about inclusion. And what do we lose from that? So, this is what I think is the benefits of our anticipatory support. Normalization of difference, increased confidence, better well-being, lower absenteeism. Absenteeism costs money, folks. It's a lot of money. Companies lose money. belonging. There are lots of things that we gain when we anticipate that people are struggling to share their realities. And it's not enough that we just say, class. It's not enough just to say women. We need to talk about what is this class, what is the story, what is the access that prevented that person from shining. Now I'm going to take you on a bit of a time machine. So we're going to go in a time machine and go backwards a little bit for a while. I hope we're going in a time machine anyway. Let's see. Can you all see that slide? Here. Anyone know what that is? Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone guess? Anyone guess what that might be? No? Okay. So Gideon's light. It is the first light bulb. It is the first light bulb ever made. Now, it's not easy to see, but that was made by a deaf diabetic man called Thomas Edison, who was also dyslexic. Now, Thomas Edison was a loner. He didn't spend a lot of time with people. In fact, spent a lot of time trying to avoid people. Made lots of mistakes. Didn't write very well either. He was able to do something that changed our world. And in a world full of candles, he would have had hundreds of people convincing him that he shouldn't bother doing this, because we don't need it. Until one day we discovered we did. I'm going to put us over to this side here. Do you know, anyone know who that lady might be right here, right to the end, here? This lady here. Anyone?
Harriet Tubman.
Yeah, sorry, over there?
Harriet Tubman.
Harriet Tubman, yeah. Anyone else? Show of hands. Anyone who heard of Harriet Tubman? Yeah, okay, just a couple of people, right? Okay. So Harriet Tubman is famous for, and may I ask this young man to just help me out here? What would you say she's famous for?
She was famous for the Underground Railroad.
Absolutely. She was famous for she was born a slave, and she managed to emancipate herself and freed herself and escaped. It's an act of revolution every single time a slave does that. It's an act of revolution every time a woman stands up and says, I won't be beaten. But not only more than that, she went back. She went back 70 times. She managed to build a life in Canada and went back across to the southern states 70 times and freed hundreds and hundreds of her slaves and get them and not lose one person. Are there many conductors who can say that on trains? She helped build a railway system that got people to Canada.
She was also the first American woman to lead a military excursion.
Yes, she was, absolutely. Absolutely. And she campaigned for suffragettes. And here I can talk about her with such joy, but most people don't know her story. You know, in the room here we are talking about gender, we need to know her story. What I'm really excited to say is that she's going to be on every, if you haven't been to America, I'm sure a lot of you haven't the last 18 months, but she's on every $20 bill. And she is replacing another guy who shouldn't be there in the first place. So, so I'm going to fast forward to that one. I'm going to move to the picture at the top. Anyone know what that is?
Computer.
A computer, yeah. Anything else? Anybody? Yeah. Say again?
Is it not a phone station or so?
A phone station? No. Okay, that's good. I appreciate it's not a clear picture as well. I'm going to take a wild guess. Sometimes I show this in England and people look at it and they think it's Enigma. Anyone heard of Enigma? Yeah? This is your session, folks, as well. Be loud and brave if you can. What is Enigma? A decoding machine, yeah? Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to stop. So a lot of people think that Enigma is not a coding machine. It's actually not. Enigma was the machine that the Germans used. It was a nickname given by the British Navy to a German machine that was killing lots of Allied troops. Enigma, the machine that broke Enigma was that one. Okay, and so that machine was made by a man called Alan Turing. Can I get a show of hands? How many people heard of Alan Turing? Yeah, great, okay. Now, that's awesome. Not many, but it's enough. Now, Alan Turing, also on notes, he's about to be on the £50, he's now on the UK £50 note. I haven't seen him on it because I don't get many £50 notes, but he's on it. Now, why am I saying that? It's because Alan Turing was really important for a number of reasons. He built a machine that changed the course of World War II. He saved thousands and thousands of lives, if not millions, and brought the end of World War II closer. He was chemically castrated for being gay. You know? He sadly took his own life. He committed suicide. The debt that we as a world owe Alan Turing will never be repaid. The UK government pardoned him for a crime he didn't commit. It's something to think about. Where does power lie in this? I'm going to move on, but we are better off because Alan Turing. We are better off because of Harriet Tubman. And we are better off because Thomas Edison. I'm going to move us fast forward. I'm talking to Swedish folks. Anyone recognize that sign?
Yeah.
Yeah, all of you, the whole world. I don't have to talk to Swedish folks, really, do I? Right? It's about Greta Thunberg. I know I'm saying her name to Swedish folks. They correct me. I'm not saying her name right. Am I right? Yeah, okay. Now, her mother would talk about a number of things. And of course you understand who Greta's work is. Of course you do. But understand the words of her mother, who worked and wrote a book called Our House Was on Fire. Her mother's protecting her child. Her mother is watching her child, a young girl, struggling to be at school, not because of just climate change, but struggling to fit in, struggling to make sure her voice can be heard. In a time when she's been bullied, not just by other children, but by other school teachers who didn't understand her. Within 3 years, in that space, she is watching G8 leaders queuing up to be in a room with her. It's something to think about. Now, of course, the conversation is about climate emergency. Of course it is. But it's not just that. What Greta has done for autism and the diversity of thought for young girls is probably just as good, if not just as big as climate change. The invitation that she has created, her autism didn't go away, folks, in that 3 years. It didn't get better. She was already better. The question is, did she have to become world famous for the world to look at autism and say, oh, look at that? Or do we have a Greta Thunberg in our offices? Do we have young people who are scared to talk about their learning differences because they're not famous? And then we'll realize they could have been. They changed the world. I used to work with them. I wish I'd asked. I wish I anticipated what she needed to get here faster. This is what leadership looks like when we can anticipate. This chap here, anyone know who he is? I'm sure you all do. Muhammad Ali, yeah. He was amazing. He was my role model. I'm a guy who struggled to read till I was a teenager. I set up companies that have changed the world. I'm so excited by that. But I'm also excited that I live in a world where Muhammad Ali existed, that he could talk in a way, that he may not be able to write the way that others expected him, but he could talk and he could inspire me and others, and in a way that he still didn't. And he talked about dyslexia and how he struggled at school. Mine was the same story. Often people tell me about Richard Branson. Some of you know him? He's quite famous here. I have nothing in common with him, except for a beard. And people say, oh, but he's dyslexic too. And I say, yeah, that's where our story ends. There's nothing in common we have. But our stories matter, not the diagnosis, not an ailment, not a disability, but what brings us to our inclusion. I'm going to just fast forward now because of time. Can I ask the room, how many people know who that is? Can I see a show of hands?
Yes.
Yeah? So two hands are up. Okay, I'm going to ask the room, it's just two, it's fine, it's okay. Can I ask the lady at the back, can you say who that is?
Isn't it Diego Rivera?
Diego Rivera, yeah, Diego Rivera. Anyone? Okay, may I ask, who is Diego Rivera?
Husband to Frida.
Okay, super, husband to Frida, right? Husband to Frida, okay. This is my next slide, husband to Frida. Diego Rivera is one of the most famous painters in the world. In the 1930s, his murals were seen by the whole, people would travel all around the world. Leon Trotsky went to visit and live with him, and he was famous, huge in the 1930s. What do you think of that? Now, I can ask next slide, and tell me, people just shout out, show of hands, who knows who that is? Okay, all of you, right? Nobody is struggling to tell me who Frida Kahlo looks like. This is change, that people are changing. That people, at a time when Frida Kahlo was gleefully, her name wasn't even mentioned. She was gleefully painting, dabbling, in fact. This is what happened, yet the world got to see Frida. Frida Kahlo had polio. Anyone know that? She had a serious car accident as well. Her journey in painting was a cleansing journey for herself to tell her story. And she talks about herself as the painter and Diego being her husband at a time when perhaps not many people did. So this is a more familiar one, and I know that you guys would know this one, so I'm just going to... this is nothing I'm going to say here that you don't know already. George Clooney's wife, Amal, is pregnant after welcoming twins 4 years ago. Breaking cycle, George Clooney's wife, Amal, has given birth, etc., etc., etc. So, Amal Clooney, I know you guys know this, and I think you're probably going to guess what I'm going to say next. But Amal Clooney, world-renowned human rights lawyer, Oxford alumni, law professor, high-level government advisor, marries an actor. In truth, all of these things, and I'm going back to the title, diversity is about counting people. Of course it is. But when we think about quotas, we have to understand there are people behind those quotas. When we think about numbers, and we share those numbers, who are we sharing it to? How does that change people's lives in rural parts of Lithuania or Sweden, where they feel that that inclusion means them too? And it's not necessarily academics or professors or those who access education, but those who know that that change matters to their lives. And that all of us are hiding so much because we don't necessarily feel we're welcomed beyond just a quota. And how do we fight to tell that story? And more importantly, and this is the key takeaway, when men care about it too. When men realize what they're missing. When we, all men, not just conscious men or unconscious men, but all men realize this is about collectively understanding the human rights struggles of the whole world, and that it matters to us, and we can't thrive. We can barely cope, but we can't thrive unless we really care about this too. So my last slide is this, and just to leave you with that, really. This is from Audre Lorde, who had a big impact on me, and I really recommend looking at her work and what she represents. And I'd love to leave you with this, to say that there is no such thing as a single-issue struggle, because we don't live single-issue lives. And not a single person in this room does. Yeah. So anyway, that's it for me. Thank you so much. I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much.